Hey everybody, welcome back to the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. I'm your host, Gordo Gambles, and today we are talking about UFC 289, one of my most highly anticipated cards of the year for one reason only. We're back in Canada, baby, and you guys all know me. I'm a very avid Canadian, well, not living in Canada right now, so it's not the best reflection of it, but I'm a huge fan of Canadian MMA and of Canadian descent too, so I've been looking forward to a card being back in our home country for a long time, and I wish it was closer to where I grew up so I could be able to go to it, but still, nonetheless, Vancouver, great place to have a card, and I really do hope this card delivers. Now, that being said, we do have ourselves an 11-fight slate, one with a lot of very fun matchups, so let's not waste any more time. As always, we're going to break through these fights with a DraftKings and a betting perspective. If you guys have any questions, please leave them down in the comment section down below. Also, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Let's do this. First fight of the night, we have ourselves the 14-7 Diana Belbita versus the 13-6 Maria Oliveira. And this is an interesting matchup to get the card started. Oliveira is going to be repping the Canadian flag, and she trains out of Niagara Falls right there. And it's going to be a good one to get everything going. But the truth is, Maria Oliveira may be one of the fighters I was the lowest on in UFC history. I was very, very low on her coming in. She has shown improvement. She has shown wrinkles to her game, and she is coming off of a win. Well, not actually. She did lose her last bout. I mean, the most recent bout in my mind is that DePaula fight where she was a big underdog. That's kind of what I got going on there. But she's someone who I didn't rate that highly due to a few reasons. Sure, her technicality is there in the field. She's got great striking, but she has a horrible ground game, does not like being hit, and doesn't really deal with adversity. So in this division, and especially in the UFC, this higher level, you're not going to be able to steamroll everybody. You're not going to be able to not get hit. And for that reason, I didn't really rate her too well. Well, Belbita, other side of things, she can take damage. She has shown some heart. She does go out there. She does like to brawl good volume, but she doesn't have that same technicality Oliveira has. And I think that for that reason, we do have ourselves a battle of the more technical fighter in Oliveira versus the better brawler, and someone who I think is going to fit better stylistically here in Belbita, which kind of really sets up my winner for this one. I am taking the Canadian early on at Belbita, but let me explain myself, because sure, there's a world where Oliveira is able to use her striking from range and outpoint Belbita to a decision, but I don't think it should be over 50% implied. I think that that path to victory, although viable, is maybe 35% at most. The fighter with more path to victories, in my opinion, is Belbita. I think she has the ability to get inside in the clinch. I think she has the ability to win these ground exchanges. And I also think that her volume is also going to be able to win her some minutes on the feet as well. So such a good pace, some good takedowns, some good grappling as well. She has these path to victories that Oliveira doesn't have. And I think that she's going to be the dirtier, grimier fighter going in there and winning these exchanges here. So while as I predict her to win this fight, I think she also has way more DraftKings viability in this matchup here. It's kind of more of a punt play. We don't really want to go out there and roster in so many of these lineups because it's not the prettiest looking matchup for DraftKings on paper, but Belbita is sneaky because her path to victory over someone as poor on the ground as Oliveira could include takedowns, and with rinse and repeat takedowns, some good top control, and even trying to get someone like Oliveira who's quit before out of there, we could have ourselves into a good DraftKings opportunity in front of us with Belbita, who is technically at an underdog price tag. Flip side of things, Oliveira, she's not going to include takedowns. I don't see her finishing Belbita. I think she's more of a point fighter, and she could score 60 points and win. That's not what I want to see. Instead, give me Belbita, the fighter I think is going to win, the one who can implement her grappling, and the one who could also potentially get a finish here in her own right. I do think she gets her done to get a nice start for Canada. Next up, the 20-5 David Dvorak versus the 9-1 Steve Erceg. I don't know if I properly said that name, but you know what I properly did? I probably did his research, and this guy has impressed me so far. He's someone who has, I got a bit ahead of my tape a few weeks ago, and he was scheduled to face Clayton Carpenter. And although I am pretty high on Carpenter, I thought it was going to be an exciting matchup. Unfortunately, it did fall apart, and now we're seeing Erceg take an even bigger step up against someone like Dvorak, who is battle-tested, who is going to go in for a war with Erceg here this weekend. Now, sure, we have ourselves on paper a very large favorite in Dvorak, and I get that. He's the guy you can trust. He's the guy who's fought the better level of competition, and he's the guy who I think is better technically. And although I'm talking up Erceg like he is going to be a good prospect, because I do think he is going to have some capabilities one day, this is a very, very large step up in competition. This is one where he's probably going to be at not only a competitive disadvantage, but also a technicality advantage against someone who's been there against the best of the best. So yes, the pick is still going to be Dvorak, although I don't think this line should be that wide, and Dvorak is not one you should be parlaying this weekend, because although Dvorak may have these edges, it could get dicey for him in a few areas. I mean, the grappling of Erceg is kind of dangerous, and although Dvorak is the more well-rounded fighter, I do think Erceg has the capability to implement some takedowns, make things close, kind of like we saw that Evloev versus Diego Lopez, I think was his name. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting here. I do think Erceg does have a higher ceiling than Lopez, but when we have a guy who's so battle-tested, so well-rounded, with such good experience, facing on a newcomer who does have some decent talent, we get one of those matchups where, in our mind, Lopez did great, and I think Erceg can do great too, but I don't think that's going to be enough to take down someone as resilient as Dvorak. So I think Erceg covers his price tag. He doesn't look plus 280, puts up a good fight, but I do think it's Dvorak getting his hand raised. But do I want him at 9.4K? Not very much. I mean, aside from that Ronderos fight where he was a big favorite in that one, he's never scored more than 74 points in a win. 57, 74, and then 94 are his 3 wins so far in the UFC. Not the highest paced guy, not the guy that I think is going to go out there and stun anybody, especially against a guy that Erceg who looks to be pretty tough. Instead, Erceg, 6.8, he is that punt play. He is someone I'm looking to roster in a few of these formats. More of a dart throw, because I do think if he's beating Dvorak here, it's probably by finish. Doesn't happen too often. When it does, it could be slate breaking. Very good punt play for me, but I am taking Dvorak to get his hand raised. Next up, 8-0-1 Blake Bilder, 13-5-1 Kyle Nelson. Yes, we do have ourselves a Canadian in Mr. Kyle Nelson, but I'll admit he's not my favorite one. He's lost me some money in the past, and it's going to come back to that Choi fight. I did bet the under there. How could I? But let's put all that away. We have a fun fight in front of us. Blake Bilder, undefeated, a guy who is very killer to be killed, and he's a very fun action fighter, and it's kind of leading me to want to bet the under once again. Kyle Nelson's been there in the UFC. He's paid his dues, and although he is improving recently, the big thing with him was he was a guy with decent punching power, but who can be taken down, can be knocked out, and his cardio is kind of lacking. So he's someone with holes in his game, and he's getting this undefeated prospect in Blake Bilder, who, you look at his record, you think he may be unblemished. Well, he does have holes in his game. He's a very, very hittable fighter, and he has been dropped before, but what he is he's very resilient, very good cardio, he keeps walking forward, and he will always push a pace. He has a ton of finishes on his record, and he does have the ability to get this fight done no matter where it goes. We saw him be super explosive against another Canadian on Dana White's Contender Series, where he was able to get that first round finish there. Nelson, on the other side, is more of a guy who's willing to point fight. Although he does have a ton of power in his hand, he more so likes to rely on his technicality. Hasn't gotten him too far so far in the UFC, but he does have that to rely on, and I think he is going to be the more technical fighter here, especially from range with his kickboxing. But the guy with the heavier pace, the better ground game, the better cardio is going to be Bilder. And I think it's going to play out one of two ways. Either Nelson's able to find the button and put down Bilder like I've seen Bilder been put down before on tape, or Bilder's going to fight back. He's going to implement his grappling, his good boxing, his pressure to break down Nelson and get a finish down the stretch. I'm playing violence in this one once again. But when it comes to DraftKings, both these guys are viable, especially the guy at 9K and Blake Bilder, who has that grappling path to victory and that cardio path to victory that I think is going to be the best way for him to get his hand raised. So I'm going against the Canadian here. I do think Kyle Nelson is a guy who I want to cheer for, but in this matchup here, when he doesn't have that same pace, pressure, or durability, I can't really pick him and get his hand raised. Although there is always a chance he's able to find that knockout, I don't think it's too likely here. Give me Blake Bilder and a very, very viable GPP play on DraftKings. Next up, 9-2 Aman Zahabi versus the 24-9 Aoriqileng, and I think this is the toughest fight to call for me in the card. One of two. There's one more I'll probably say that about later as well, but this is a very interesting one because Zahabi's not someone who I think is the guy I have the best read on. I mean, I love watching him fight. I know he's a very, very technical striker who does have a black belt, but he's not someone who wrestles very often. He's not someone with a ton of volume, and although he does have that power, he can lose optically, and he's not the ideal fighter here. However, in this spot here against someone like Aoriqileng, who is going to come forward, have much more pace and pressure, is Zahabi's technicality going to be enough? Because I think Zahabi's going to have way more technicality here. I think he's going to be the guy winning these exchanges when they are happening, but he doesn't throw enough to go out there and win in the optics that way. And then in the ground, is someone who will initiate the grappling as much as Aoriqileng. Does Zahabi have the takedown defense or the submission game to put up a fight? I want him to, and I want to cheer for him, but I think this fight is pretty simple. I'm really torn on taking a pick here, but the fighter with more DraftKings upside is Aoriqileng. Aoriqileng is someone who has been a great DraftKings target because he will go out there and he will shoot takedowns. Although he didn't do it against Perrin in his last fight, I mean, he was able to get a quick win bonus against Else there, but he shot and landed 1 against Durden, 3 against Molina in a very, very fun fight there. He has the style to go out there and put up good takedowns and good volume, and against a guy here in Zahabi, that's kind of what you got to think his game plan is. Aoriqileng is going to be someone who's going to want to push forward and win optically, win the volume, win the takedowns, outpace someone as Zahabi who's kind of been on the slower side of things in terms of pace, because I don't think he's going to be the winner of a technical striking exchange here. So for that reason, if you have someone who is a credentialed black belt who's probably going to have some decent reversals versus someone who's as aggressive in the wrestling, Aoriqileng has some very good DraftKings viability, and the Mongolian Murderer at 8.3 is someone I'm looking to roster here because I do think he has great takedown upside, good volume and pressure upside as well, and he does have one of the higher ceilings in this mid-range while also going probably overlooked compared to the big names we have on this card. So a very good sneaky option there. When it comes to picking a winner, I want to trust Zahabi to go out there, be more technical, land the flusher shots, defend the takedowns, but I'm going to have to go with Aoriqileng here. I think his style bodes better here, but I would not be surprised if Zahabi gets it done. However, got to go with my gut and Aoriqileng here, and unfortunately go against 2 Canadians in a row. And here's the real problem is, I'm about to make it 3. I'm not doing the best job of representing Canadian MMA and cheering them on because I'm taking Miranda Maverick 11-4 over Jasmine Jasudavicius at 8-2. And I love both these fighters. I've backed Jasudavicius a bunch. I think I've backed Maverick even more. They're both very, very fun fighters. But when we're looking at, before even doing the tape, most of you guys had to realize that Maverick's going to have a huge strength advantage here too. Because in this matchup, we do have, in theory, we have 2 wrestlers, but Miranda Maverick looks so much more dominant out there. Because Jasudavicius is coming off a fight where she was able to control Fernandez, take her down, do that there, but Fernandez was clueless on the mat. Maverick is an incredible wrestler. She's got her black belt in BJJ. And then on top of that, the better striker here, I do think, is Maverick as well. Maverick has been there. She's fought the better fighters. Coming off a dominant performance against Shanna Young, too. I mean, she has gone out there and she has displayed incredible talent, incredible poise, and someone who I think is going to project near the top of this division. She does have these tools. She's still getting better, averaging 2.7 takedowns for 15 minutes. I do think she's going to be stronger here. And on the feet, I do think she has a striking edge. But let me say some good things about Jasmine. She's very tall for the division. I do think she has some good offensive wrestling, and I do think she has some decent fundamentals of keeping range on the feet. I want to back Jasmine. I will be backing her in the future. This is a big, tall task ahead here. Maverick is going to have the wrestling advantage. I think she's going to be the one to be the aggressor on the takedowns. The thing is, I don't even think she needs to, because on the feet, the discrepancy is very large for Maverick. She's going to have the volume edge, the technicality, and even the power to get inside that long build of Jasmine Jasudavicius. Sure, Jasmine could go out there, shoot takedowns, pose some problems, but I don't think she has the physicality to hold her down there and win minutes, and I don't see her finishing Maverick either. For that reason, Maverick is someone who I think is going to be winning this fight at a decently high clip, and she is my preferred play on DraftKings. Also, a decent parlay piece this week if you want to go that route. So 9.3, I don't think that she's going to be my highest owned fighter because I don't think she's going to shoot as takedowns as proactively against as compared to someone as Young or Mazo. Instead, I think she's going to be content to beat her in the striking, be the faster fighter there, and fend off the takedowns in her own right. So give me Maverick to win, give me Maverick on the money line. Don't know if I'll get there too much on DraftKings, although she does have upside because she does rate out well as a grappler. All right, remember how I said I had one more fight that was pretty tough to call? Well, it's the 12-4 Imavov versus the Chris Curtis 30-10. Very, very fun fight. And one between 2 guys who are projecting well, 2 guys who have fought in... Has Chris Curtis fought in a main event? 2 guys who have fought in these main cards, been in the spotlight for a while. 2 guys who are primarily strikers. And I think that's kind of where we're going to go at here, is we're going to have the precision boxing of someone like Imavov, who's been a sniper, like his name entails, versus a guy in Curtis who's been a plotter, who will walk forward, great counter striker, great boxer as well, but willing to counter strike and has been fortunate enough to face some good matchups and some good counter punches to go out there and secure him a few of these wins. I mean, he's got 4 wins in the UFC, 3 that were by TKO, all against fighters who you could consider pretty chinny. Not taking anything away from him. He is someone who fought very well in those fights, but his 4th win was against a grappler, and only a grappler in Vieira. When he's fought these guys who are able to stand with him, exchange with him, and put on more of a pace, like I think Imavov is going to do, such as Gastelum and Hermansa did, he's lost those fights. So when it comes to picking a super razor-close fight in this one, I got to go with Imavov, because I do think he's going to have the volume edge, the pressure edge, and I think he's going to be just as technical on the feet. So if you're someone like Chris Curtis who relies on that counter-striking and solely the boxing, the guy with more volume and more angle to shoot with the kicks as well from Imavov could pose problems. Now, is Imavov going to shoot takedowns? I don't know, because on one side of things, that could bode well for him, because I do think he's the superior grappler, but he also has the worst gas tank. So I think that if he does go out there to shoot takedown, could tire himself out. Maybe not the best course of action, because I do think on the feet, you do have yourself a very, very close fight. But because I do see it being a 15-minute striking affair, pass on DraftKings, pass in the betting market, very, very close, although I am picking Imavov to edge it based on volume and activity. On to the main card, we have the 15-6 Marc-Andre Barriault, 15-7 on Eric Anders. And my history of picking against Canadian ends here. We're taking Marc-Andre Barriault. Got that out of the way. Let me explain why. The power bar is a guy I've loved backing before in the UFC. Someone who I've done quite a bit, for better or for worse. I mean, I backed him against Marquez last time. I took him against Wright, but I also took him against Nojokwani, and that did not go well, getting looked at early. So I have my love for Marc-Andre Barriault. Also have a little bit of anger towards him, but I do think he's someone I really want to back in the UFC because he has, such as my good friend Liam Picks Fights likes to say, the big one. Always bet on cardios, the ABCs. He's a guy who's called the power bar, has insane cardio, and in this matchup here, I do think he's able to use that in his favor. He's not someone who likes to use the grappling. He's that guy who likes to stay on the feet, kind of a hockey player. He kind of embodies this Canadian MMA sort of thing because he'll get in there, just like he's on, just like he's on skates, in the clinch, uppercuts, dirty boxing, whatever it takes to drain that guy out and finish him over the stretch. Very technical boxer. That's kind of all he's got is the clinch and boxing. He can be taken down, he can be controlled, and he can be held at range. But what we know for sure is he's going to walk forward, he's going to look to pressure his opponent, and he's going to look to strike from all angles. Eryk Anders, former NFL player, very physically imposing, but he lacks that technicality and cardio you want to see from someone facing Marc-Andre Barriault. Sure, there's a world where Anders is able to go out there, shoot takedowns, put Barriault on his ass, and win a fight that way, but can he maintain that pace for 15 minutes? Can he go out there and get Barriault out of there? I don't think so. I don't even think he can take him down at 2 eye of a clip. I don't rate the technicality too much, so I do think Barriault should be the rightful favorite here. Barriault's going to have the ability to use his strikes, use his technique, and also really wane on that cardio of Anders, probably towards a later finish. I might even play the round 3 props as well. I do like myself Marc-Andre Barriault. Now, in his wins, Barriault scored well. 119, 101, 81, 132. We know he has the style to go out there and score well on DraftKings with very good pace, pressure, and probably late finishes as well. And I do think he's a very, very viable DraftKings option this week. But as much as I've been talking about Marc-Andre Barriault, how much I love him, we have to show some love for Eryk Anders. I mean, when he's won fights, he scored 118, he scored 81, 105. The guy's upside is definitely there. Because if he wins this fight, I do think it's going to come with a lot of grappling. And I do think his ceiling is decently high for an underdog at 7.8. So either way, I think this is a very, very good fight to target on DraftKings. I am very heavy on the Marc-Andre Barriault side, but it should be a very, very fun fight to get the main card started. Next up, 16-6 Dan Ige versus the 17-4 Nate Landwehr, and we have ourselves another very, very fun matchup. Nate, the train, Landwehr is someone who's always action-packed, someone who's always going forward, and who's rattled off a few wins here in the UFC. Klein Onamalingo, 3 fights where he's looked very impressive, was the underdog in 2 of them, and he's a guy who likes to use his pace, his pressure, kind of like Barriault, but he's way more of a brawler. This guy can take a ton of damage, keep walking forward. He's got some decent technicality, but a very well-rounded game. He's willing to use his takedowns and his top pressure to score well that way, and I think that's kind of what he's got to do here. He's got Dan Ige in front of him, someone who is a battle-tested UFC guy who's been there at the top of the division, very technical, powerful striker, and was also very, very durable. The problem with Dan Ige is we've seen him being controlled, and against a guy who can grapple, sure, there can be a problem. How well do you rate Nate Landwehr's grappling? Because in my eyes, there's no question that Dan Ige is the much better striker, and although the volume's there for Landwehr, we've seen Dan Ige use his technicality before and have the activity to put up with these guys who are in his face. And in fact, when I'm taking a guy like Austin Lingo, I think I picked Austin Lingo against Nate Landwehr last time. Horrible pick, but the reason why was because the power of Lingo and the poor striking defense of Landwehr is not a good combination. And where Ige has just as much power but more technicality, I do think he's able to lock out Nate Landwehr as well. And that's my official pick, because I'm taking Dan Ige to win this fight. However, when we're talking about DraftKings, who has a better DraftKings upside? Well, it's Nate Landwehr, 7.1K. I mean, when he's winning fights, he's scoring 102, 104, 91. I mean, the guy's very good at using his pressure, his pace, and I think in this spot here, his takedowns. He's going to need to use his activity, need to use his takedowns, and I think that although he doesn't win this fight too often, when he does, it's slate breaking, someone who's going to have very, very good GPP viability, and one that's going to need to rely on his pace, pressure, and takedowns to score very well on DraftKings, but also to win this fight. However, the pick is Dan Ige. I do think he gets him out of there, a decent GPP option up top, but I do think he is a far superior striker in this matchup and does find the chin of Nate Landwehr. And these last 3 fights are insane. Starting off with Mike Malott, 9-1-1, Adam Fugitt, 9-3. Mike Malott, man, super fun fighter. Canadian guy, one of my favorite Canadian prospects because he's all action. I mean, he's got 11 fights, 10 of them have ended in the first round. The guy's talented. And shout out to a couple of my buddies over here who played hockey with his brother, all this stuff. Mike Malott's a great guy. I love the guy. And I'll be cheering for him this weekend, and I am picking him to win this fight. But there is one big red flag with Mike Malott, and that is that cardio. That is, how does he look after round 1? Because like I said, 11 fights, 10 of them ending in the first round. The last one was a draw against a poor opponent. And one thing we know from Adam Fugitt, He's going to walk forward, he's going to have pressure, and he's a dangerous guy out there for a lot of the time this fight goes. So let's slow down a bit here. Mike Malott is going to be the superior fighter, technically in not only the striking, but also the grappling. We saw Mike Malott shoot takedowns, submit Nunes pretty early last time. He is a beast fundamentally when it comes to not only the grappling, but also the striking. And I do think he adds that edge and technicality there against Fugitt. Flip side of things, Fugitt's more of a brawler. He's a very good striker as well, but he's got power. He can finish fights a lot of the time, and he can take a decent beating as well. The problem I have here with Malott is not only that cardio, it's also the durability. We've seen him been dropped, we've seen him be finished, and although he's so good offensively, his defensive skills could use some work. He can be hit. It's a dangerous look when you're backing a guy Malott who we know is going to be solid, but for one round, and after that, it's kind of a question mark. So don't get me wrong, I'm picking Mike Malott. I think he's the best DraftKings play on the slate, which, by the way, why is there an American flag beside his name here? Come on, Canada represent. But he is a very GPP option because there's always a world where not only could he tire out, but that Fugitt could find the chin. I mean, Fugitt's pulled off an upset before. We know he has that power. We know he has a decent ability to brawl. But this is probably my favorite DraftKings matchup. I mean, both these guys are violent finishers. Both these guys have incredibly high ceilings on DraftKings, and this is a fight I'll probably be playing the under in again. Because like I said, Malott's killer to be killed, and I do think although he's able to kill Fugitt, it could get dicey if he makes it out of round one. So pick for me is Malott likes to use his grappling, go out there, take down Fugitt, and sub him there. If not, we could get a war. We could get one where Fugitt's able to rally late. Either way, this is a super, super fun fight that you do want on DraftKings. At 8.8K, I do think Malott probably has the second highest ceiling on the slate behind Amanda Nunes. And the flip side, I think Fugitt could have the highest upside as an underdog, maybe other than Oliveira, because he has such a killer to be killed opponent in front of him. So I think a finish materializes. I think either way, the winner scores well in this matchup. I do think you want this fight to target, and it should be a very, very fun one for as long as it lasts. But give me the Canadian, Mike Malott, to get her done. Co-main event, 33-9, former champion Charles Oliveira versus the 22-4-1 champion hopeful Beneil Dariush. And this is a very fun matchup. And I don't want to call myself an Oliveira hater, but I have picked against him in the past. I'll admit to it. It hasn't looked good for me, but I have picked against him, and I think I'm going to have to do that again here. Because although Charles Oliveira may be the most dangerous fighter in almost any weight class, he has defensive issues. And against a guy who's shown great submission defense like Dariush, against a guy who's shown some great technicality in the feet, I think he has more paths to victory here. Charles Oliveira has shown that he's not only the most dangerous grappler maybe in the world, UFC world, he's a very competent striker, some incredible power on the feet, some great technicality. He's dropped some great people before, and of course there's a path to victory where he's able to drop Beneil Dariush. But I think it's a very low outcome. A lot of the time I think it's going to be Beneil Dariush winning the grappling exchanges in terms of being on top, being the more technical striker on the feet, and having the way better cardio and durability down the stretch. And that leads me to have Beneil Dariush favored. Now, if Oliveira is able to knock down and club and sub Dariush, is anyone going to be surprised? No. Oliveira is one of the most dangerous fighters we've ever seen. But Dariush has more reliability here. Oliveira, although he's hungry, could be on the downfall after the last fight. We've seen him drop in almost every matchup he had. And when he doesn't have a clear grappling edge against Dariush like he has had in the past, it's kind of hard for me to find him much of a way to win this fight, aside from that flash knockout. So give me Dariush, although I do think that Oliveira is forever dangerous, but this is a fight I definitely want on DraftKings. Oliveira, 7.6. When he wins fights, he wins DraftKings slates, let me tell you that. 113 against Gaethje, 94 against Poirier, 109 against Chandler. The guy scores well. And in this matchup here against Dariush, where I do think he needs a finish, is probably going to score well as well. Whereas Dariush has scored well in his wins. I mean, his last one, maybe not the best example of this, but when he's out there and he's finishing his opponents, 117 against Holtman, 98 against Close, 106 against Camacho, 105 against Dover, 105 against, he does score well as well. So either way, I do think you want some of this matchup as well. One of the most exciting matchups we've seen in a long time. I wish it was 5 rounds, but give me Beneil Dariush as the guy I can trust more in what should be an exciting matchup for as long as it lasts. Last but not least, we have the 22-5 Amanda Nunes versus the 14-6 Irene Aldana. Shortest breakdown on the slate. Amanda Nunes, at her peak, if she's training, could destroy Irene Aldana. That's how it is. You're not going to convince me otherwise. She's great. Amanda Nunes is the GOAT, and she showed that she is still at the top of her game when she trains it, like she did against Pena. Whereas we just saw Irene Aldana pretty much get dominated by Macy Chiasson, get absolutely destroyed by Holly Holm back in 2020, and it was still losing fights to Chookagian and Pennington before that. We've seen Irene Aldana lose. Whereas we haven't seen Nunes really lose or be the weaker fighter, we've seen her not try hard enough. And that's why you can't go out here and say, put $1 million on Amanda Nunes because she's the better fighter, is because sometimes she doesn't want to go out there and perform like she did against Pena. Sometimes she underestimates opponents like she did against Pena. and it comes back to haunt you. But at the end of the day, the more skilled fighter, the better technical fighter is Amanda Nunes. And she should win this fight at a very, very high clip. And I'm almost tempted to say that she is the most reliable fighter here, but she's not. She is so much better technically, so much of a superior grappler, wrestler, power threat. But if her heart's not in it, Aldana is a very competent striker and could have the ability to keep her away from range and pose problems for Nunes. I don't think that's too often, though. I think a lot of the time here is going to be Amanda Nunes taking her down, doing what Amanda Nunes does and scoring very well. And we've seen that when she wins, Nunes has scored 153, 98, 125, 158, 140. Like, Amanda Nunes is an incredible fighter, the greatest women fighter of all time, and one of the best DraftKings fighters. Although her heart hasn't looked into it recently, her heart doesn't have to be into it all the time because she is a far dominant fighter here, and I do think she gets her hand raised a lot of the time. 9.5K, you do want her in your GBP lineups because she always has the ability to break the slate. However, the big question mark, what you're going to hear from me all week is her heart in it? I think her heart is. I think she's going to make Canada proud. Not that she's Canadian, but just to have a nice main event. And I do think she continues to be the GOAT of women's MMA. Another masterclass. I don't know what else to say other than that. So that's going to do it for me here on the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. Quickly, let me go over my quick picks. I'm taking Diana Belbita to get it done by decision early on. I'm taking Dvorak by decision early on. Bilder, let's say round 2 submission. I'm cheering for Zahabi. That's a very close fight. Let's say Aoriqileng by decision. Miranda Maverick by decision. Imavov by decision. Barriault by round 3 KO. Dan Ige by round 1 KO. Mike Malott by round 1 submission. Dariush by round 2 KO, and Amanda Nunes by round 3 submission. We'll give Aldana some time out there, but it could be a very dominant fight. Flip side of things on DraftKings, I'm taking Nunes up top. I'm really targeting the Bilder Nelson fight, Malott Fugitt fight, Dariush Oliveira fights as my main fights to target, as well as also having some ownership of the Aoriqileng fight and the Barriault Anders fight. As underdogs, GPP-wise, Oliveira, Fugitt, Landwehr are great GPP options. I do like Belbita as an underdog. I think Fugitt, although I think Malott wins this fight, is maybe the best underdog of the bunch. Cash, Curtis is probably the best one there because I do think he'll either be there for all 15 minutes or get a win of his own. Either way, hopefully I've thrown out enough knowledge there for you guys to go out there, win your DraftKings slates, and win some money this weekend. Make sure you're following me on Twitter at GamblesGordo so you can check out all my bets. They should be posted Friday. I'm actually flying back home to Canada for, I'm collecting my diploma for graduating my undergrad there. So I should be back in Canada to watch this fight with all my buddies back there. It'll be good. Wish it was in Toronto, but either way, we got fights back in Canada, and I hope there'll be way more in the future as well. That's going to do it. Please hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel. Please comment anything, any questions, concerns you may have. I hope everyone enjoys the cards. Let's make some money, guys.